Hello and welcome to the Six L's podcast. My name's Mike Nicholson from Six L's. Today I'm going to be speaking to Maria Cadbury from Wult. But before I do, can I say a big thank you to the team at Lumen Research. For those that don't know, Lumen Research are an attention company that help brands to plan, buy, measure and optimize their media and creative investments towards real human attention, which leads to increased outcomes. So thank you very much to the team at Lumen and welcome, Maria. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Good.
Delighted to be here with you today.
Indeed, it's lovely to have you. So thanks so much for your time. I've spoken to your husband before, but I think it's the first time we've had the pleasure. So very nice to chat to you. Just to kick us off, as is traditional, could you give us an overview on who Wult are, please?
Yes. Wult is a data compliance signals company, so an automation platform. We have a SaaS solution where you can work with us ultimately on your own organization, but we're really here today to talk about the curation solution that we have. So Wult's data compliance data or signals, we sit very much in the hygiene, brand safety hygiene. So the new brand safety today is brand safety and data compliance signals, because, and we'll get into more and more as we go through, but when we look at publishers and when we look at the landscape, and the ICO is very much coming after the UK, we have a solution that we can apply to any of your media plans to make sure that you reduce your risk, we mitigate risk. So a data compliance curation platform.
Lovely, thank you. So when I've thought of data compliance, I've never been an expert or been sort of deep into the weeds on it. I always think of the publishers basically having to shoulder that burden, and the publishers get compliant, and if they are, then wherever their inventory flows through the ad ecosystem, it's all good, right? But I've learned very recently that might not be the case. So who's kind of on the hook, as it were, from a data compliance point of view in the ad tech world?
Yeah, brilliant question. And actually, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of people who are not sure about this, even though they really should be sure. So in terms of responsibility, the publisher does have a huge responsibility for this. But actually, from a fine perspective, if the ICO or anybody else goes and looks at your organization, you are responsible for your supply chain. So if you've got a publisher who is in your supply chain and they are doing dark patterns or they are collecting data incorrectly or anything else, then you are responsible and you get fined, not them. So that's what's the really interesting thing.
So it's just to paint a picture there. So if I'm an SSP and I have a publisher's inventory available through my SSP, and my SSP gets audited by the ICO, I'm liable for the fact that publisher is serving their inventory. Wow, that's quite a big liability, isn't it, for an SSP? And is the DSP liable as well if they're plugged into that SSP?
Brand safety platforms, DSPs, SSPs, anybody using pre-bidder tech, anybody who is, and even collecting data, and even from a data perspective, you have to make sure that data was collected on a publisher that actually was adhered to all the rules and guidelines.
Okay.
And the nice thing with what we do is we can see through the whole supply chain. So we can see anybody who is working, say you're a brand safety platform, an SSP or a DSP, we can look at your platform and we can tell you who you're working with and how they score on our easy green light. So the platform is really beautiful and easy to manage with. Same, we have looked at a tremendous amount of agency campaign cyclists, and every one of them, between 10 and 35% of everything we've seen is finable.
10 and 35% isn't compliant?
Isn't.
Right.
Is not. And then we can easily optimize that. Say, if you take these here out, then you will have mitigated your risk. Also, what we've seen at early tests now as well is if you optimize to compliance, sites who really manage it properly, your performance increases as well. We wouldn't say, look, this is not a performance-driven solution, but it does lift performance in terms of more of an efficient campaign.
Okay. You used a term there, which is one of the terms when I was researching for this podcast that stood out to me, called dark patterns. But before we come to dark patterns, the other term that stuck out to me was cookie consent theater. Now, I'm assuming that's not a new flavour of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. So what is that exactly?
Yeah. It's a really nice piece that actually Rune, our founder, has written. It's a blog. And what we've really looked at is we've said it's the end of the cookie theatre, because the theatre is how publishers, there's a lot of publishers who are not compliant because technical changes happen on their website, which affects something else. Okay, so there's a lot of non-deliberate, non-GDPR or governance compliant activity, but there is also purely bad actors out there who are pulling the wool over people's eyes. And we talk about that, it must end. So we talk about that from a performance perspective. Dark patterns, which we'll go on and talk about, is a really big play on that. And that's where it gets really quite seriously like out of hand on it. Yeah, and we also talk about the fact that it's when it looks like it's in favor of the consumer and it's actually not. There's an awful lot of ways where some publishers look at trying to get extra data points, because every extra data point is extra CPM or cost of revenue for them. So how do we get more data? So the end of that is basically, with the ICO very much coming after the UK, everybody's having to tighten their nuts and bolts basically of it. And there is now technology that wasn't there before, that you can scan a publisher and we can see exactly who's doing what. And we're saying it's the end of the theatre, because people are getting away with a lot of things that they really shouldn't have been doing previously. And I think there's a few ways of looking at that, because like we're bringing out the publisher. We've got the Publisher Insight solution that's paid for, then the Publisher Freemium tool as well. And that's for the publishers, because we do believe publishers get a very hard time in this industry, right?
I've been a publisher or worked with publishers for a lot of my career. It's tough, yeah.
So they get rinsed and rinsed and rinsed. And ultimately, all the money in the ecosystem, it comes from users. Consumers consuming the publishers. So that's why when we look at what they're doing, they've got a CMP in place. There's a lot of people who aren't necessarily bad actors, but we call them all bad actors, but there's definable sites between 10 and 35%, as I mentioned. But we have this solution where we were like, you can take this, you can run it across your own your publisher, you owned and operated. And what you're doing is, instead of checking your own homework, you've got third party checking it for free. So we want to give that to them to go, we want to help the industry in a really good way. And as a business, then we're obviously selling our curation solution. And that's to agencies, to brands, to brand safety platforms, SSP, DSPs. Kind of, we work with anybody who needs to run an ad on a website to make sure it's compliant.
So that sounds awesome. That finally something the publisher can have for free. They don't have to pay for in some sort of way through adtech tax. But do you have now SSPs saying to publishers, you need to do that checks and balances before we plug you in? Because the liability, I didn't know until very recently that the SSP would be liable for a non-compliant publisher. So it would make sense if I was an SSP to say, right, we'll do the Wult test, make sure that you are compliant, and then once we've got a green tick or whatever it gives you, a certificate, then we'll plug you in.
Yeah. And we've got quite a lot of those tests now happening in markets. So what they're doing is they're checking their own campaigns with us, and then they speak to the publisher separately. There is one brand safety platform, and what they're looking at, they're running it across all the publishers that they run with. So yes, and then that they've got an insight into the performance from governance of their whole network, which is really impressive. And that's how we would imagine everybody would like and ought to potentially use this the technology. Because you need to, like, when you've got the ICO, they've done like 4 warnings now, they've come out and start off in September, to say, what was it? 53 out of 100 publishers are not compliant. They did a big shout out to Sky Bet and said, you're collecting, which is a part of dark patterns, is where you collect cocky information before the consumer could accept or decline, right? So that's naughty, right? Now, they may or may not be doing that deliberate, because there's certain technical things that can happen on a publisher side to make that it can happen a bit too soon or not. But anyway, then the ICO comes back in January and said, we've now looked at top 200 sites and we see 67% of them are not compliant. So they're issuing warning shots. Please get your ducks in order, pull up your socks, sort out your behaviour. And they've been very clear on that.
Is that warning like a final warning, or is that a general warning? And then if they find somebody to be non-compliant, they get another warning before they fine, or could it be a fine straight away?
No, so they do warning shots first. And whenever you look at Europe, GDPR fines in total. What we've seen is there tends to be warning shots before actual fines as well. So one of the biggest fines that we've seen in our not from a brand's perspective, like for example, Vodafone in Germany was just fined 15 million, I think, or just under that euros in June, so this last month. But 15 million was for the supply chain with the agencies. Okay, whereas Criteo was 40 million euros was fined year before last, and that was for their supply chain. So everybody's getting these letters. But if you're an SSP, so think of Criteo, so if you look at any of our SSP, DSPs or brand safeties, they're really not aware of what letters any of the publishers are getting and what they're doing with those letters. Are they cleaning up? Are they actually fixing the website to make sure it's operating the way it should be? And but yet, if they come and check any of those platforms, anybody with pre-bidder tech, they'll get fined, because they'll get fined for their supply chain. So it's about taking responsibility for where you're taking money and running ads within a supply chain.
Yeah. So I would imagine it's bad enough being a publisher and trying to get compliant on your own site. If you're an SSP, you've got a whole hundreds, thousands of publishers to worry about. If you're a DSP, you've got maybe 10 SSPs and hundreds of thousands of publishers, right? So is there not some sort of paperwork that shifts liability on the publisher if I'm an SSP that basically says, if you're not liable, it's not our fault. Like if someone comes after us, we're going to send them to you. That doesn't exist, right?
No, it doesn't exist. And kind of there is an annual survey that every organization will do. So they'll once a year, there's a form that's filled out. Say you're an SSP or DSP, you'll get everybody in your supply chain to fill in a form to say you're doing all these tick boxes correct. But you see, digital is a daily, hourly, ongoing changes happen. And every publisher has a new tech player, a new person who's managed it, or new data players on their platform as well, on their website. So there's a tremendous amount of changes that happen throughout the year. And where I think the industry has really lagged behind, and it's like where they really need to step up really, is realizing an annual survey doesn't cut it. Because whenever we look at the supply chain and we look at any organization, we see what's happening throughout the supply chain. It changes all the time. Now, it doesn't change by the minute, but it can change by month or every other month. And unless you're using automated technology, you don't get to see that.
Yeah.
And also when people fill in a form, they're going, yes, we have that, but they haven't actually run our tech or similar tech. It's on their own sites. Like there's a lot of publishers who are not aware that they are breaking the law because
what is that, blind spots? Or they think spots. They did a survey last year and it seemed to be all right, and then things have changed, is it?
That's exactly it. It's you need to use using a manual survey to double check that everybody's saying, yes, I've done that correctly, without actually using digital tech on a digital website that's digitally updated and technically adapted on a regular basis. It's kind of, I'd say it's madness, especially because we can see, if we can see it and you use our tech, you can see it. We make it we simplify quite a complicated process. And especially now with the ICO, they've kind of changed from just GDPR to what's legitimate interest, and they've made it slightly more grey area and a lot more nuanced. So people are grappling with that. And again, you could just run this technology and then you can get the green lighting of exactly what's happening that's ticks and what's not and what to be changed.
Don't name anyone, obviously, because for obvious reasons, but have you had any sort of horror stories where a DSP's plugged in your tech and then they've realized there's a whole world of pain in their supply chain that they didn't know about?
Yes and no. So no, I won't. I think we've got this saying that we should glorify those who are doing it really good. Because the ICO, these are all our friends, right? I've grown up in adtech, you know what I mean, an agency world. So no, I wouldn't name a shame. I would definitely say, yes, you're right. We've definitely looked at...
Open people's eyes to the size of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. There hasn't been one company. No, that's not correct. I can say The Guardian has come up as a shining star of you can't do better. I don't think you can get better than that. They've got like the smallest number of data partners. I mean, everybody else got thousands and they've got like hundreds, not many hundred. And it hasn't affected their revenue, which is a really good, it's really interesting because people put more data players on that to make more revenue.
Yeah.
And then when they scale it all back, it hasn't affected their revenue. But their performance is really, really strong from a campaign perspective, and they can protect their CPMs. And that's the other thing from a publisher perspective. You can yield higher CPMs or very much call yourself premium if you've got your compliance tick box. That's what people just don't want a headache. People don't want to deal with this stuff. People think it's a DPO's problem, and it's not. It's anybody who runs campaigns. It's their responsibility.
Sure.
But yeah, besides, I'd say The Guardian and a couple of others who are the shiny name and glorify, basically, there's very few organisations out there or campaign lists that we've looked at that you wouldn't go, I hope you get this fixed before the ICO looks at you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't want any of our friends in the industry to be fined.
No, of course, no. So it's kind of obvious to everyone, I think, that publishers are responsible for this. I didn't know till recently that SSPs could be liable for a publisher not fixing. Certainly didn't know a DSP could be. So going upstream once more, are advertisers liable in any way if they use a DSP that advertises on an SSP that has a publisher? Could they end up in hot water?
Yeah. And I think, yes.
Do they know this?
They should know this. Yeah, we will be doing a lot more with brands and things coming up. There's a lot more things to get closer to them, but we've actually very much focused in the agency and the pre-bidder adtech space itself. But I guess if you look at Vodafone in Germany, just June last month, they got fined for agencies' supply chain. So they ran in places they shouldn't have. So you haven't seen much of that previously. When you look at brands, whether it's the media giants, they're like TikTok and WhatsApp get fined all the time, but there's quite a few other brands who've been fined as well throughout. But it's usually how they're collecting data on their sites. It's been, do you know what I mean? They haven't sort of taken it one step to exactly what you're referring to, looking at as a brand and the agency or the platforms. And we're starting to see that now.
Do you have any insight in terms of the way that the ICO deal with these companies? Do they look at the misdemeanor and go, fair enough, that was an honest mistake, get it fixed and there'll be no problem sort of thing, versus I think you're doing that on purpose? Is there a different way that they behave towards the company based on the sort of... They're
very clear on... So I don't think... So let's just take a step back. I don't think there's a world where you can be 100% like the governance. We'd never claimed that, but there is a world where you are as close as you can get, and there's a world where you're doing your best. And they have made it very, very clear in their announcements to the pre-bidder tech as well as the publishers. Publishers, put up your socks, we can see, and we've given you a few warnings. So we are looking at you and coming after you. Pre-bidder tech, we're actually looking at you how you use your supply chain. And if you are doing everything you can, that will be considered. So there is that. I think the way I describe the ICO and the government GDPR governance, they're not necessarily like your parking ticket guys who just give you a parking ticket as fast as they can because they get commission on it. Right? It's in there. They're incentivized to get their allocation of fines per day. Yeah. This is not the case. This is like these companies, organizations are there to tell the industry going, look, there's a mandate out there. Do not misuse consumers' data. And we have given you all of these guidelines, so you follow it, you won't get fined. We will go and check you all, give you a warning, fix it. And if you get that done, we won't fine you. So, yeah, I think doing the right thing is really important, and it's seen as it's your saving grace, basically.
Yeah. So you can obviously see a lot of the industry. So just to put you on the spot a little bit and just to finish off, can I ask you for 4 bits of advice? 1 for a publisher, 1 for an SSP, one for a DSP and one for an advertiser. So let's start with the publisher. What would be your one bit of advice around compliance?
Yeah, so whenever we speak to a lot of publishers, we've got a few who are really game to take our free tool and run it on their tech because they're already doing a great job. You get a lot of publishers who are like, no, we've got a CMP, we've got this sorted. We're doing everything right. And we have actually looked at it. We can just put your URL in and we can see everything. And actually, the way to look at it is going, we would never tell anybody who to use or not to use from a CMP perspective because it's not in our interest and crack on. But what we would say is who's good at checking their own homework. It's usually better to get a third party to check your homework, especially when it comes to compliance. And obviously would recommend our tech because we have been evaluated by some big organizations in Europe and we have come up trumps. So I'm very happy to say that. So that's the publishers with SSPs and DSPs. And again, the fact is, it's really important to run this tech. We can do a first trial for you. We can do a small sample for free, but ultimately it's a paid solution. But I think it's really important to take the first step and do the first insights on your supply chain and see how it comes up. You don't have to work with it all the time because guess what? You might believe it's completely squeaky clean. So take a portion of it, then you run it on it, and then you see it's not squeaky clean, and then you make a decision where to go next after that. But it's really important to understand. We understand the ICO have seen it, and we can see it. The supply chain is not clean right now, and we have a responsibility. With an agency, same thing again. It's really easy. Like we're set up on Index Exchange and other places as well, right, from it. But you can just buy the data in there and you can see straight away, run the tech on your campaign list and see who's not performing and then just take them out. If it is a really important publisher that brings big reach,
have a conversation.
There's a free tool for them to just run it and fix that errors, right? But it's usually, it doesn't really come down to those necessarily, what we've seen in all cases. Brands, the same thing again. From a brand's perspective, I think it does come down to brands believe the responsibility is the agency, right? Because they pay an agency to manage their media. Now, the agency is a little bit like the publisher. Their CPMs are good, you know what I mean? There's very little left of that £1 CPM, right? So then it's going to go, well, do your first test, evaluate your third parties that you're working with, get them to run the test, and then get them to sort it out for you. Do you know what I mean? So who pays? Maybe the agency, maybe it should be in the adtech space. That's what we would say. But it does come down to do the first analysis and get an insight. And it's all easily fixed.
Great advice. I've learned a lot today. Maria, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been brilliant. Appreciate it. Thanks.